My guest today has traveled across the country on a bicycle. Find out more on today's episode of the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast. You all know me. My name is Art and I'm the host of the show, but I have a very special guest with us today that you might not know her. Her name is Teri Brown. She's an author. She is a podcaster. She does just a little bit of everything. So Teri, we're looking forward to meeting you today and welcome to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, it was always fun to have new friends on. So welcome. It sounds like you do, like I said, just a little bit of everything. It seems like, as I was looking at your website, you write, you teach, you mentor. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Yes. So, it's crazy when people ask, who am I? It's like, I don't really know which side of me, should I talk about? Because you're right. I do a lot of different things. I am a writer. That is what I do by profession. I started out writing for small businesses, doing articles and website content and even like small ebooks and things. I've always had a fiction writer in my head who was afraid to come out, and I've finally let her out. I'm a mom of 4 and a stepmom. I call myself the bonus mom of 3 others. So I have 7 children, 10 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. So yeah, I have a very full plate of family. I love to help other writers. There's a local group I've been working with, especially with marketing, because authors don't have a clue what it means to market a book. I know I didn't. I wrote my first book and said, great, now it's going to sell. And I waited, and that's just not the way it works. And it was almost offensive to me that nobody knew I was out there. It was like, but I put it out on Amazon. Why don't they know? And it's been a very unusual learning curve for me. I went from not knowing anything, and 8 months later, I'm actually helping other people. And what I'm doing is I'm just telling them things that have worked for me. So, I do that. I love to speak. So I've started doing a little bit of speaking at different events, and I am co-host of a podcast called The Writer's Lounge. So yeah, I'm kind of a busy person.
Was it hard at first to market yourself like that, just to put yourself forward?
Yeah, so I think especially it wouldn't have been so hard if it had been my nonfiction stuff, because for me, my nonfiction, if I was writing about real estate, I was doing it because I had a client who needed me to write about it, and they had specific people in mind that were going to read it. And so to market that would have just been, obviously this was written for this market and they want to read it, and you just put it out there, and it's not about you. Although I wrote it, it was facts. And what I did was I found a nice way to put them together so that people would want to read it. With my fiction, these are my characters. These are my babies. This is me. Any author who tells you that they write and what they've got out there isn't somewhat biographical is not telling you the whole story. Okay, because you can't write without putting yourself into the characters, right? And even if it's not you, but someone you wish you were, you're in those characters. And so if someone doesn't like it, well, then it's a little more crushing than if they don't like some nonfiction article that you wrote about, real estate or whatever. So yeah, it was you have to really believe in your book. You have to believe that it is worth someone's time and effort. And I don't know, it's a little harder. So I was afraid at first, and then I just decided that being afraid wasn't the way that I was going to get my book sold. And I've come to believe that I wrote a good book. It's a good book. Is it the next, great American novel? Probably not, but that's okay. It's a good book. It stands really well on its own, and I can go out and sell that to people. So yeah, it's a learning process. You have to get to that point where you can say, I wrote a good book, and then not feel like you have to hide under the table after you said it.
Yeah. So some of it comes back to just having confidence in yourself then, and what you've written. Yeah. Well, I know that can be hard for folks. So a little bit later in our episode, Terry's going to give us some tips on how to write, especially for new writers. And I'm looking forward to that. Before we dive into it, though, I always like to ask my guests, what's your favorite book? And are you reading anything currently?
Okay, so I don't have a favorite book. And that probably is the most horrible thing as an author to say, but my favorite book changes all that. No, it changes. It's like, what was my latest
Mhm.
favorite book? That kind of thing. One of the books that I've read recently that I really loved was A Gentleman in Moscow. And what's amazing to me about that is I read it because of a book club. I would have never picked up the book because the title does not interest me at all. I'm thinking A Gentleman in Moscow. Ugh, okay. The cover to me did nothing. It didn't send me at all. So when I went to the library and picked that book up, and it was thick and the cover was uninteresting and the title did nothing for me, I thought, oh, this is gonna be horrible. And then I read it and loved it and took so many notes. I could have taught a 3-hour lecture class on it. I mean, I just loved the book. So that taught me a little something. You really can't judge a book by its cover. We do. People do. You've got to have a good
Mhm.
cover. You have to have a good title. You have to have a good little blurb on the back, or people aren't going to open it. But the truth is that there are probably a lot of really good books out there that don't have a good title and don't necessarily have a great cover, but really have amazing story inside. So yeah, so that's one of my current favorites. I also loved
Mm.
A Man Called Uva. Do you know
Mhm.
that one? Yeah.
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 Yes, I
And
do. I
then
read that maybe last year.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then he's got several others out, and one of them was Britt Marie Was Here, and I loved that one. I loved that character, Britt Marie. I don't know why. I just could feel her and understand her. I just really loved that. Um, I have a favorite childhood book. I actually have a couple.
Mhm.
I read all the Nancy Drew, every single Nancy Drew. And
Oh
before
yeah.
that, there was a series called Trixie Belden. And it was also a mystery
Yep.
series. And it was just the reading level was a little less. And I read all of those. I read a book over and over and over called Mrs. Piggle Wiggle's Farm. And unruly children would go to her farm and she would essentially fix them. And she would fix them by helping them learn better habits. But I don't know why I loved that book. I bet I read it 15 times as a kid. Um, but the first book I ever remember being read to me was a little sing-song book my mom used to read, and it was called Over in the Meadow. And there's even a little song that goes with it. It's like over in the meadow where the something fly and blah, blah, blah. And it has little pictures to it. And I remember mom reading that to me, and so it still sticks with me. In fact, I bought copies and I've given them to my grandchildren when they get old enough
Mhm.
to want to read a picture book, because that one really stuck with me as a kid. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I love to read. I've been reading. My mom said I taught myself to read. I don't remember the story, but she told me that I asked her when I was going to learn to read, and she told me in the first grade. And I had just started kindergarten and apparently figured out the reading process and was hiding underneath the covers with a flashlight reading a book. And mom found me and I started to cry. I was sure I was in huge trouble because I wasn't supposed to learn to read until first grade and I wasn't old enough yet. I don't remember that, but she said I just cried and cried and cried. And she was just irritated that I was using the flashlight batteries. But
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's so funny. My in-laws, my mother-in-law especially, she would give our kids books when they were little. So, we would read them to them, and that was such a wonderful gift. So that my oldest son, when he started kindergarten, he was so excited because I'm going to school. I'm going to learn how to read. He came home the first day of kindergarten, heartbroken because he said, they
I
didn't teach me
didn't
how to
read.
read today. Yeah, it's like first day of kindergarten. This is garbage. What did I even go to school for? Um, it took him a couple weeks, and he finally realized, oh, everything we've been learning the last few weeks is helping me learn to read. It's going to take a while. So, and then he figured it out. But yeah, well, he's in college now. But I really appreciate grandmas and grandpas who are able to
uh,
just encourage that reading. Yeah,
encourage the
it's
reading.
so
I
good.
think that reading, yeah, reading to me, if you do nothing else, I homeschooled my kids, and I
Hmm.
homeschooled for a variety of reasons. I started out because my son was just too advanced for kindergarten and he was going to be a troublemaker, and I knew it. So I thought, well, who
Yeah.
can't homeschool kindergarten, especially for a kid who already knows everything you're going to teach him there, right? And then I
Right.
got really hooked on it, and thankfully so, because my next child um, did not learn to read until she was 10. She had some kind of they called it reading delay. I had her tested. There was no
Hmm.
specific issue, but she just wasn't catching on. And because I homeschooled, I was able to read everything out loud to her. And she was only behind in the reading. And once
Hmm.
she learned to read, she caught up very quickly. Like, she went from pretty much a non-reader to reading at grade level in about 6 months, but she would have been 4 years behind, that kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
but what I say about, especially, like homeschooling, is teach your kid to read and teach your kid to love learning. Because if you do that, the rest is easy. I mean, everything else is easy,
Hmm.
because what's history? What is, what are all those other subjects? It's reading, and it's reading and understanding and loving learning. And yeah, so I love books.
Yeah, we homeschooled our kids for some of their time. My daughter right now, she's in 8th grade and she's going to public school now, but she was homeschooled. But but yeah, then there were reasons why we sent her to back to school, because she was such just craved people and to
Right.
be around people, and it was getting hard. So anyway, all that aside, but my oldest especially just craved learning. My wife said that he wrote a paper, I think he was maybe 7th grade, 8th grade, and he wrote a paper on Thomas Edison. And she said, this was a better paper than what I would find in college, because she worked at a library writing center in college and would help grade college papers. And she said, this is a better paper than what I see in college. Maybe a little bit of nepotism, but still,
It has,
it,
I think it has a
yeah,
lot to do with, can you instill that love of learning?
yeah.
And, if you can instill the love of learning, then it just kind of flows over into all the topics, writing and reading and science and history and, pretty much everything except math. Not that math isn't a love of
Mhm.
learning, but you don't see the reading aspect of it as much there. But I mean, it's just, to me, if you can teach your child the fundamentals of math, and then to read, and then the love of learning, then nothing is going to stop them, because they're going to get to a point where they can take it over on their own and they say, this is what I love. And that's true whether you're homeschooling or public schooling. Help your child learn to love to learn. And if they love to
Hmm.
learn,
Yeah.
the rest is easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And, with that love, I mean, anything is possible, to be
Exactly.
honest. They apply that passion to whatever it is they want to do, and they just flourish. So,
Yeah, I
and
love
I
it.
see
Yeah.
that in all three of my kids when they're pursuing an interest they have, and that love just comes out, and they just dive deep into it. It's amazing.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah. So how did you become a writer? On your journey from avid reader to writing? Uh, how, how did that journey take place?
Yes, so it's interesting. As a 4-year-old, I said that I wanted to be a writer, but I also wanted to be an Olympic ice skater and a heart surgeon. So I don't really know that it holds a lot of weight, because I was obviously never
Yeah.
going to be an Olympic skater, and heart surgeon. I don't like blood, so we can say that neither one of those is a good idea for me. Um, I went to college. I have 2 majors and 2 minors because I could not figure out what I wanted to do with my life. My parents would have never allowed me to go to school to be a writer, because writing is a hobby. It's not an actual job. Um, they feel, my dad passed away, but my mom feels differently now. Now she's really proud of the fact that I'm a writer. But going through college, that would have been an absolute, no way are you going to go to school to be a writer so that you can starve to death the rest of your life. That's
Yeah.
um yeah, because writing and artists or anything that was creative, that was just, that isn't real. That's hobby stuff. So then, I don't know. I started working as a virtual assistant for someone, because I have four kids and I was homeschooling, but we needed a second income, but that's hard to do when you're homeschooling four kids. Mm-hmm. So I started working as a virtual assistant, and he said to me, "Have you ever thought of writing? I love your emails. I just love the way you write." And I said, "Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, who hasn't thought of being a writer? But no, not really." And he said, "I have this ebook that I need to write for my business. Would it be something you'd be willing to help me do?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And that kind of jump started me working with small businesses. So I started writing articles and things along that line. But there was part of me that really desperately wanted to write a book, like a novel, but I was terrified because, like I said, that's part of me. And I didn't have what it took to be denied, like the idea that someone was going to say that's horrible was more than I could handle. And so it was like, I just can't do this. At the time I was in a bad marriage. It was an emotionally abusive marriage. And I just didn't believe in myself. I just didn't think this was a possibility. But when I got out of that marriage in 2017, one of the first things I did was I wrote a manuscript. Now I can tell you that it will never see the light of day. It's not good, but it was 50,000 words, and I realized I have it in me. It's the characters were too flat. It was too perfect. Everything was too perfect. My characters didn't have any flaws because I couldn't allow them to have any flaws, and so it's not a good manuscript, but I learned quite a bit from that. So then I wrote another one, and it too is it's better than the first one, but it's not that great. And I did that several times where I had these story ideas, and I may eventually go back to them and try to do something, because I think the story ideas were good. It had good bones, but the execution was poor. But it's like anything that you're learning, like I've said, these, famous painters, their first works were not great. They were still figuring out how to put the paint on the brush and get everything working. And it's the same thing with writing. The more you write, the better you get. And so I wrote Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, which is my debut, but I was terrified to let anyone see it. And that's where this bicycle ride that you talked about comes in. So I have since remarried, wonderful man. He has always wanted to ride across the United States on a bike. That was like on his bucket list. And I wanted a big adventure. I wanted to do something that my kids were going to say, "No way, there's no way you can do this." And when he was talking about that, it was like, that's an adventure. My kids would say no way to that. So we actually rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle. So, the two-seater, one bike. Yeah. Pulling a trailer. We looked like a small circus going across the United States. And we started on the coast of Oregon, and we rode all the way to Washington, D.C., which is 3,102 miles. Do not leave out those two. Those last two were spectacular.
Yeah.
Yes. And while going across the United States, I kind of buried a lot of demons that had me not believing in myself. And I came out the other side and realized, I can do absolutely anything I put my mind to. If I want to do this, I can do it. And I pulled Sunflowers Beneath the Snow back out, dusted it off, did a little bit of editing, and got it into the right hands. And lo and behold, it was accepted and came out in January. So yeah, it was it was an adventure on many levels. It was physically very challenging for me. Mentally, it cleared my head. And then we raised money for Toys for Tots along the way. So it was just like, it was a win-win-win all the way across the board.
Yeah. Well, that's the part of your story that really just jumped out at me is that sounds like something I would love to do one day, is, to travel like that, but to do it at a slower pace.
Yeah.
I guess the benefit on a tandem bike, if you sat on the back, it's a little easier to pedal, right?
That's what everyone says, but it's not true.
Yeah. Just put your feet up. It's fine.
No, in fact, people would shout to my husband, she's not pedaling. But the truth is that the front, they're tied together. Okay, so if
Sure.
one's pedaling, the other, you can feel it. And he would know if I wasn't pedaling because he would be the one pulling him and me and the trailer. He would know if I
Right.
wasn't pedaling. So he is obviously much stronger than I am, and he's also very athletic. And when he and I met, I hadn't been on a bicycle in 40 years. So he
Oh, wow.
obviously is way more. I mean, he's been doing competitive bicycle racing since he was in high school. So he knew what he
Sure.
was doing and I didn't. But in terms
Sure.
of effort, yeah, I mean, he probably did a little more than me simply because he has it in him to do a little more than me, but I gave it everything I had. So
Oh, I'm sure you
yeah.
did. Yeah. Yeah. No, but what an incredible journey. Just not only discovering the country, but, you know, I don't want to sound like a cliche, but discovering yourself too
No,
and
it
what you're
is.
capable of.
Yeah, I think that it sounds almost like a cliche, that, oh, I found myself, but I really did. I learned so many lessons about me and about life and about everything. Like just even small things like, what you need is there.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. You just have to be looking for it. The number of times that we would be in trouble, like bad trouble, like horrible things happening, but realizing, okay, we're coming up to this really bad section of road, and it's going to be bad for 5 miles, and we're on a tandem, and this isn't going to be fun. And what are we going to do? Inevitably, somebody would come along that would say, oh, well, I can put your stuff in the back of my pickup and we can just go right across that 5 miles. The number
Mm-hmm.
of times that we needed something small, and there it was. The number of times that, I don't know, we also learned a lot about people.
Mm-hmm.
We went across in the summer of 2020. That's COVID summer. That's riot summer. That's if you were watching the news summer, you thought that the United States was going to hell in a handbasket, and life was, people were horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not true. Yes, on the news, people are horrible. Yes, there are horrible people. I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm very well aware that there are ugly people out there. But the truth is that most people are good. Most people are trying to be good. Most people want to help other people. Most people are living their lives, raising their families, going to work, doing the same thing that you and I do. And as we went across the United States, that's what I learned. The number of people that we met that were just fantastic. They wanted to sit on the side of the road and chat with you and find out what you were doing and donate to your cause and help you if they could, and offer you suggestions and tell you things you didn't want to miss that were coming down the road, and all of those things. But on the news, can you imagine a news story
Mm.
that started out with, Terry and Bruce sat on the side of the road today and talked for 15 minutes with a lovely couple about, I mean, nobody listens to that, right?
I don't know. I'd like to.
I know, but
Yeah.
it's just not what the news does.
Right.
If that lovely couple had tried to bomb us, then we would have been on the news. But the fact that we were
Sure.
able to sit and talk with people who were completely different from us in many respects, but completely the same in others.
Mm-hmm.
I've just decided that we're more alike than we are different, generally
Yeah.
speaking, and that if we'll give ourselves just a few minutes to talk, like we've only known each other just a few minutes here. I already know that you've homeschooled. I've homeschooled. We could talk for hours now,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? You like books.
Right.
I like books. We could talk for hours. And so it doesn't take much, and you realize connections with people. And once you find a connection, then anything else that might keep you apart kind of goes away and doesn't matter much.
Mm-hmm.
What, it won't really
Yeah.
matter what your political affiliation is, or what religion you adhere to, or what nationality you are, or anything, once we find a connection. And so I think that
Mm-hmm.
was just a very cool thing to learn coming across the United States, was how
Mm.
alike most of us are, at least in some respects. And that's what we need to focus on. Let's try to find those similarities and focus on those, because once you do, the differences don't matter much.
Right, right. And what a year to discover that too in 2020, like you're saying. It just uh what bad thing could happen next is probably it's going to
Exactly.
happen. And then but then to get out there and actually connect with people on that human level, what a powerful story. So now I got to ask, are you going to write about your bike ride, or have you already?
So I am in the process of writing. I have two books. One of them my husband and I are going to do together, and it is more of a technical how to do such a huge bike ride, like how do you go
Mm-hmm.
about making those kinds of plans. It's not my kind of book, it's more his style of book, and he just feels like there are books out there, but I feel like a lot of them don't tell the truth. They kind of sugarcoat everything, and they assume that everyone is highly athletic and able to ride 150 miles a day. And the truth is that I was not highly athletic and I still was able to do it. You just have to think about how you're doing it a little differently. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what that book will help people, whatever level you're on, kind of figure out what level are you on and what does that mean for this adventure that you're going to take. Whether it's a 100 miles or 1,000 miles or 3,102 miles, what is it that you need to do to plan for that? Then the other book is more of an inspirational kind of book about things that I learned along the way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gotten 30,000 words of that down, and then it kind of like just died. I didn't know where to go with it. So I've put it away and I'll pull it back out and work on it again. I kind of like philosophized myself right out of it. I had nothing else to say. I need to go back and come at it from maybe a different angle, and I'll have more again. But I think I just kind of wore myself right out of it. It was like, okay, I can't be any more inspirational than this. This is it.
I'm tapped out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, they both sound really, really fascinating. I enjoy reading stories in books of people who have like hiked great distances, the Appalachian Trail, things like that. And yeah, they talk about walking, 30, 40, 50 miles in a day. And oh my goodness. And how do you do that? And
Right,
how do you train for
right.
that?
Right.
And a lot
So
of
I
them,
actually
yeah.
I actually wrote a blog the whole way across the United States, and it's called Double Butted Adventures. So Butted, like two butts, double
Mm-hmm.
butted adventures. And it's on WordPress. And so yeah, I mean, feel free to go and take a look and read it. It's all of the stories. My inspirational book will have some of those stories, but it's going to be a little more philosophical, more of the thoughts that those stories brought about, as I contemplated what we had done. It's very hard for me to put together the fact that we rode across the United States, because I rode 72 riding days.
Mm-hmm.
I did not ride across the United States. I rode 72 riding days. And when you added them up, I ended up across the United States. And in my mind, I still have trouble. I know I did it. I've got all the pictures, I've got all the blogs, I have all the saddle sores. I remember all of it. But it doesn't seem possible to me because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't ride across it. In fact, people would say, "Where are you headed?" And we would say Washington, D.C., but not today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you
That's a
know,
long way today. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Until the very last day when it was like Washington, D.C., we'll be there in about an hour. Yeah, it was
Mm.
just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That was a crazy day. So,
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm definitely going to look that up, and I'll put a link in the show notes for folks if they
super.
want to read about your journey. Well, all this talk about writing, we were joking that we might end up just talking all day, but I do want to talk about some writing tips. I like to usually ask for at least one, but I'm kind of pumping you here for more than one. Just to talk about writing, it's such a great way to express ourselves, and to something about that, just even the act of getting your thoughts down on paper helps me even just clear my mind if I'm cluttered, and words have such incredible power to them. So somebody out there is thinking, I might want to be a writer. Uh, what do I do? What are some tips you'd give them?
So I have three things that I tell people who are at that point. I want to be a writer, but I'm not yet writing. The first thing is then start writing. Like, don't wait. Don't wait for a particular time or a class or some kind of a degree or anything. Start now, because you're not going to become a better writer by thinking about it. You know, like I said, my first manuscript is no good. Like, I will never show it to anyone in the form that it's in because it's no good. But without that one, I wouldn't have been able to write the second one. And without that second one, I couldn't have written the third one. And without that one, I wouldn't have written Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. I wouldn't have a book, you know. And so start. Don't let things stop you. You don't have to have a degree, and you don't have to have any particular knowledge. Get started, you know, and read, so that you're reading, and then I don't mean read about writing, I mean read, so that as you're writing, you're trying to emulate a little bit of, like, what do you like when you read? What pulls you in? And those are the kinds of things that you should try to do when you're writing. And you're not going to do them well at first, but that's okay. You know, you give it a shot, you kind of see where it goes, and you'll start developing your own style. So then the second thing I say is that once you've written enough that you believe that you have something of value. Now, I do not mean that it's publishable, but you're feeling this isn't too bad. This is starting to feel good. Let someone else look at it. Someone you trust, but someone who will give you honest opinions, not the mean kind of honest, because that's too hurtful, but someone who's willing to say, here's the good points, and here are a few things I think you could work on. And then take that information. Don't get angry at it. Don't say, oh, I can't believe they didn't like everything I wrote. But listen to what they have to say and use that going forward as you write, you know, new things. And then the third piece of advice that I have almost sounds like I'm contradicting the second piece, but it's, you don't have to listen to everyone. There's more than one way to write, you know. And so so with Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, I have had people that have reviewed it that have said, it just moved too slowly. I had trouble getting into it. It moved too slowly. But then I have someone else who said, it moved so quickly, I wish that she had spent more time on whatever. Well, which is it? Did it move too slowly or did it move too quickly? And the truth is that it did neither. But for that reader, it was too slow. And for this reader, it was too fast. So not everybody's advice is something that is going to work for you and who you are as a writer. So it's okay to listen and to try it out. And then if it really doesn't work for you, if it isn't your style, if it doesn't feel right, if it's not comfortable, it's perfectly okay to say, well, I gave that a try and it's not good for me. And you can put it down and then try something else. You know, so those are like my big three that I tell people. But I've come up with a fourth one recently, and I think that it's because of the experience that I had. I was excited, I got the book, it's now published on Amazon, it came out on the 25th of January, and I literally sat at my computer waiting for the sales to come in. Do you know how many sales I got on the 25th of January? None.
Yeah.
Zero. My friends and family had books from me. But in terms of Amazon, nobody knew who I was. I'm still new. I'm a debut author. Nobody had a clue who I was. Do you know how many books are on Amazon?
A couple, at least. Yeah. A couple million.
Over 5 million. Okay. Over 5 million. What is the likelihood that someone is going to stumble on Sunflowers Beneath the Snow by Teri M. Pretty slim. Pretty slim. So the other thing that I would tell people at the point that you are now thinking of publishing, you need to begin looking into, how does one market a published work? What is it that you need to do? And find there's a bazillion tools out there, right? But not all of them are a good fit. So find the ones that fit for you and work for you. One of the things that's working the best for me is coming on podcasts. because I love to talk. And so for me, it's a perfect fit, right? You ask me questions, I talk and talk and talk, you tell me to shut up, and then we move on to the next question, right?
Right.
And I love it because it allows me to talk about books, it allows me to talk about my writing, it allows me to talk about me, it allows people to get to know who I am, and it works really well for me. But if I were an introverted kind of person who didn't like the limelight, then podcasting would be a horrible fit.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that wouldn't be best. Maybe what might be best for someone like that is to find other people who are willing to talk about your book. So you look for bloggers who are willing to, blog about you for you because you don't feel comfortable doing this. Now, I've actually done both because, I just reach out to anybody. Hey, you want to read my book? Hey, you want to talk about my book? Because, I'm pretty much, I tell people that the only way you can get a book to sell is to be willing to stand on a table and dance naked with it. And, that's, over the top. I recognize that. But if you're not the advocate for your book, no one else is going to be. So you've got to find what it is that feels comfortable for you. So, do not wait until the day the book comes out to realize that you have no marketing program. Do something ahead of time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's great. And I'm just thinking of this even as a podcaster. There's a lot of what you say, especially about marketing and stuff that overlaps. And you can just find all of these different courses and things about how to market this and that and all that. But I like what you say. It really comes down to what is going to work best for you and for your audience. Where is your audience going to be at? And yeah,
so that you have to think about that. Like, where does your audience live? Mm-hmm. What are they doing? How do they spend their free time? Where are they going to accidentally bump into you? And that's where you need to be standing and shouting so that they say, oh, I didn't know about that podcast. And then they go and listen. You can shout and shout and shout, but if you're shouting to people who are unlikely to listen, what good is it doing you? Right. I saw an article one time. It was like, 432 things that you can do to market your book. Well, you must be out of your mind. Do you know how long it would take to do 432 things to market a book? And not only that, but of those, how many of them actually work? Mm-hmm. And how many of them would work for me? And how many of them are right for someone who writes a character-driven fiction, historical fiction? Like, I'm looking for a specific audience, not just anybody who's ever touched a book.
Right.
And so you have to think about that and then find what really feels good for you. Everyone's talking about TikTok. I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't have the equipment. It's too technology heavy for me. I don't know what to do with it.
Right.
I do fine on this kind of thing, but on a TikTok where it's just the camera and I'm supposed to be, I feel like an idiot. Now, if someone on the other side of the camera were talking to me, then I would be fine.
Yeah.
But talking to myself on a TikTok just doesn't do it for me. But I know that about myself, right? And so even though everything I read right now says TikTok, I know it would be no good for me. I would look ridiculous because I would look stiff and awkward, and everything that I produced would be and it wouldn't get me what I wanted because it's not a good fit for me.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and it's funny because in real life, quote unquote, I'm more of an introvert, and yet something about just me turning on my microphone, I could talk for hours just to myself, and I love it.
So, maybe TikTok would be great for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or do you like it better having someone on the other end to
well, I do like the conversations like this, definitely. But yeah, it's just something I really enjoy even more than doing it face to face, which is weird, I guess. But and I do have a TikTok account for the podcast, but I don't know much. I usually just throw
Yeah,
up a graphic and music and say,
yeah,
hey, there's a new episode. Yeah.
yeah. So I have a TikTok account. I do have one, and
Uh-huh.
occasionally I put things up. Like I have a book trailer up there, and
Sure.
a couple of clips from podcasts I've put up there because those are easy. It's already done. I just cut out a piece, stick it up there. Ta-da! Want to see the rest of it? Here's where it is. But I watch TikToks and I think, well, that's kind of fun. I'd never do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. When I told my family I had a TikTok account, my daughter, she's like, oh, Dad, no, what are you doing? You're going to embarrass yourself.
Yourself, yeah. Don't do
Like,
that, Dad. Don't.
I'm like, don't
Yeah.
worry. I won't be doing any of the dances or anything. I'm
No,
just, I'm going to put up
I'm not
show
gonna do
clips.
that wall challenge where you bend over and your foot comes over your head. I'm just
Oh,
not doing it.
yeah, right, right. Exactly. Oh boy. Well, those are some great tips, I think. And I just want to thank you for sharing them and encouraging all of us to, to just start doing it. What you were saying about writing, it reminds me of one of my favorite writers is Ray Bradbury, and
Mhm.
and he'll say, to write. He said he started trying to write a short story every week, and I think he said he started when he was about 10 or 11. And it took him almost 12 years, 10 to 12 years to actually get something published. I mean, of course, he was a kid and all that, but it was a long time. And, his point is that just keep doing it, just keep writing. And you'll eventually, I know he says that, even as an adult, you write one a week, it's 52 short stories in a year. They can't all be bad. And I'm
Yes.
like,
Well, at least
challenge,
one of them's got to make it, right?
challenge accepted here. Yeah. Right. 52
Yeah,
bad stories, but
yeah, I like that
yeah.
idea of, just do it. What is it? There's the thing about 10, is it 10,000 hours? If you've done something for 10,000 hours, it makes you an expert.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're never going to be a writer without writing. And
Yeah.
you're never going to be a good writer without continuing to write and to learn and to figure out, well, what could I do to tighten this up, or what could I do to help my readers see more? I have a book coming out. It's An Enemy Like Me. It's coming out in January. And when my editor got it, she told me that there was a character that she didn't care for and felt that he didn't need to be there, and she wanted me to cut him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that character was way too important to me. And I was really quite distraught that she would think that this character wasn't important. So I slept on it for a few nights, and then I contacted her and I said, I just really disagree. And she said, well, what I want you to do then is pull the character out of the book, just read his parts, and you're going to see that there's no arc. There's no story arc. He's not needed. And I did what she said, and she was right. There was no story arc, but I felt that he was needed, so I added it. And I made the story arc so that he was worth keeping in. And when she read it, she agreed with me. So I learned something. It was like, wow, what an interesting way for me to learn whether or not my character has what it takes. He did in my head,
Mm-hmm.
but I had not done what was needed for my readers to see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had two options at that point: take him out or give him a better story arc so that my readers, when they read him, felt that he was worth being in the book.
Mm.
And so it's interesting. I think that that's how you become a better writer. You listen to people, you ask questions, you go back and you look and you try and you rewrite and you rethink, and you learn that you never start your first chapter with the weather. And I mean, there's just little things that you just don't do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that you want that first chapter to be something that grips them, and not just the first chapter, but that first paragraph. It's got to be gripping, even if it's not really the beginning of your story. Find a way to make it the beginning of the story, and then you can go back and fill them in on all the other stuff you wanted them to know, and that's okay. There's just a lot that you can learn, and I learned so much of what I do because I read.
Mm-hmm.
What do I like to read? Why do I like to read it? What about this book is compelling to me? What about this book is not? I learn just as much from books I don't enjoy.
Oh,
What
yeah.
is it about this book that I'm not enjoying and why? So that I can avoid doing that in my own, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then, yeah, but then, like I tell people, on the other hand, I loved A Gentleman in Moscow, and I have a friend who is an avid reader. I'll bet she reads 20 books a month. She reads way more than I have time to read. She hated that book,
hmm.
hated it. Does that mean that I'm wrong or that she's wrong? It doesn't mean either. It
Mm-hmm.
means that it wasn't the kind of book that she enjoyed. So, you do have to always keep in mind who your audience is and who you are as a writer.
Right.
And it's going to be okay. There are going to be people who read my book and say, not for me. And that's fine. That's fine. Go find a book that is for you then, by all means, keep
Right.
reading, you know.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so many good things. I'll be thinking about this interview for a long time now. So thank you. But Teri, I do have to get things wrapped up here soon, but I really appreciate you coming by and just sharing your knowledge with us, your excitement with us. So right now you're working on a couple of books. So where can people find you online and
Yeah.
order your books?
So the best place to find me is at my website, and it's terrymBrown.com. That's Terry with one R. And don't forget the M, terrymBrown.com. And there I have a link to all my social media. I'm on a lot of it. And you can also get my books on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, pretty much anywhere books are sold, you can find it. So it's Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. An Enemy Like Me is coming out in January. And then I've got other ones that I'm kind of in the different stages of writing. So
All right. Well, thank you for encouraging us all to just to follow our passion. Appreciate it. And so you take care. And for everyone else, thanks for watching. Or if you're on the podcast, thanks for listening. And we'll see you next time.